Hidden Object Guru here, joined by
The unabridged gamer.
who normally does that voice as a joke, but now actually can't talk.
Remember, kids, always have your humidifier on when you're going to sleep.
Oh, oh God, yeah, no, it's vitally important. So yes, we're here to talk more Clone Wars, and I'm kind of excited about this since this is going to be the majority of the Clone Wars style that we're going to be talking about from now on, because we're done with traditional animation and have moved into the CGI era. And the first thing we're going to look at is the motion picture, which is, of course, a motion picture in name only. It is quite explicitly 4 episodes of a TV show edited together.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's really not subtle in that regard, and it's especially obvious when, as I think I mentioned last episode, there's actually an episode they made later on in the series to basically explain some of the really weird questions the opening of this movie raises with the Battle of Christophsis of why aren't they using this? Why the hell is this happening? It's like, oh yeah, we explained it in another episode because it wouldn't be Star Wars if there were retcons.
Oh, that's good to know, and I'm looking forward to hearing about that later on. I'm kind of it's interesting because the movie so obviously is there to just reintroduce everybody to the characters, as the show is it's kind of a pilot, but they don't really assume you've already watched the animated series, and so as you said, this entire series takes place between him defeating Ventress and then the kidnapping of the Chancellor. So all 6 seasons of this show, including this movie, take place between the 2 seasons, or I guess season 2 and season 3 of the animated series.
Basically, in the original timeline, that's how it worked out, which
Okay.
was, yeah, it was definitely interesting because for those who missed last time, yeah, there was this very tightly wound continuity, and then the Clone Wars TV show came in, and it was kind of like, "Hi, that's a great continuity you got there." The
Yeah.
issue, someone just leaped in and changed a ton of it.
Almost everything, I'm guessing.
Oh, fair amount. Yeah, some whole characters get rewritten, and we'll get into it. But I'm just curious, what were your initial impressions? What's your feeling on this movie?
Overall, I would say it is a very good introduction to this stuff. Like, it is definitely a competently produced action story. There are a lot of really good action beats, but at the same time, how do I put this? It seems so much less mature than the rest of Star Wars, right? And what interested me so much about, I mean, yes, Star Wars is a children's movie. I understand that. Like, I know who it's aimed at. But at the same time, there is a gravity to it, right? And there's a gravity to the storytelling, there's a gravity to the situations. Like, this is scary life and death stuff that is happening in those worlds. And yes, it's, it's mostly there to sell the toys, but it's a big deal what's going on. There are consequences to what happens. There's weight to what happens. And that is definitely there in the Tarkovsky Clone War stuff. I mean, people are getting killed all over the place. There is brutal monsters, there's scary situations. Like, it is, I want to, again, I know it's aimed at children, but it is a very mature story being told. Whereas this really does seem like Star Wars Junior for kids.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is something that's kind of, for some reason, that just seems to be a stylistic choice with the director, Filoni, the guy
Okay.
in charge of all this. Because, for context here, this was basically like his second biggest project that he got to do. Like, he got to be a director and have a helping hand on the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which, as you'll recall, was also probably the kiddiest season of that show.
Right.
Then ended up just lucking into this whole situation. And with every series, like not just this, but when he got to Rebels and when he did Star Wars Resistance, every time he starts a series, he starts it off really kiddie. And I'm not sure why. Like later on in the series, it actually does get more mature and more serious. But for some reason, every time he starts something, he seems to be expecting it to be watched by 4-year-olds every time, and it leads to this weird case where it's never entirely clear who the audience is. It's like they're assuming that it's a scorched earth policy and there's not going to be any carried over audience from the past. It's an
Huh.
odd thing.
Well, no, and I mean, that is something that I was definitely considering when I was watching it. It's like, is this intended for me? I feel like I'm way too old to be watching this cartoon. There's a plucky young girl Jedi, and she's having awesome adventures and being wacky, and I'm like, I did not know about this character. I never heard about this character. I mean, the first I was hearing about this character was you mentioning last time that they had thrown away all of the like the entire continuity of Skywalker never having had an apprentice, right? Never
Yeah,
having taught a Padawan gets completely thrown away by the pilot, and him having a Padawan is the entire plot of a lot of the Clone Wars.
yeah, it was a really weird thing, and that was one of the biggest issues for when they first revealed it. Is like, not only are we jamming this character in, but given that she's not there in anything else,
Yeah,
how are we going to address this? Like, it's not like a kid show is going to show Anakin Skywalker killing his
his
own
own apprentice.
apprentice.
Although logically, that I mean, we're talking about the arc of his character. That is what should happen.
Yeah, and they almost do that in Rebels, but that's a whole other thing. Like, they still they don't they pull their punch there.
Okay.
But
Oh, so this continue character continues over into Rebels.
yeah, yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, she just keeps showing up in all sorts of things that she's, and that's a thing that should be mentioned is I don't. There's a lot of people who hated her as a character. I don't hate her as a character. I hated that she raised a lot of unnecessary questions when there's so many other ways they could have introduced her, because they do make her work later on, basically by slowly over time rewriting her rather than necessarily a coherent character arc at first. But over time, she does become a kick-ass character. You can see why there's a potential for her. But especially in this show, right here at the very beginning with the movie, it's like she's calling him Sky Guy, and
Yeah.
just you can't help but
It's a real Poochie effect.
yeah.
It's
And
like,
here's
oh, she should be cool. She should be tough. She should be in charge. Whenever she's not on screen, people should be asking, "Hey, where's Ahsoka? What's she up to?"
and
You really do get that sense that they're pushing this character. It is not at all natural the way they are pushing this character on us hardcore right from the start. Like, you feel like they could just have her dropped in there and then gradually build up the character over the series, but it's like they want to go from 0 to 100 with this brand new character in her first 4 episodes.
the
And
weird
especially everything we learn about, like, and I mean, the thing is, this is going to sound strange, but, and maybe they're going to say this is why Yoda decided to give Anakin this. Like, basically, everything I know about the Jedi Order up until this point is that Anakin is the only jerk Jedi we've ever had. The only Jedi who's kind of a jerk and kind of reckless, and this is what I'm talking about, established in the various movies and with little other
Mhm.
stuff I've seen. And they always say, well, he didn't have a full lifetime of training, so he doesn't have the correct discipline, blah 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 blah, but he's so powerful that we needed to bring him on board anyway, even though he wasn't given the proper training since very young, and that explains why he doesn't behave, or in many cases think like a Jedi, right? And now you've got her, who is even more zany and reckless than Anakin ever was, and she's just yet another Padawan, or now apprentice. Sorry, it was a youngling, is now a Padawan. I forget the ridiculous names. Bear with me, but come on.
Oh, it's
But
fun, but here's
yeah, but I just found it strange because that's, again, flying in the face of everything I've learned about the Jedi, and it makes the existing characters seem less significant or unique. That this character is like, no, it's just like, there's just a lot of wacky, in your face Jedi.
and
See what
the
I'm saying?
reason here's Okay, I've mentioned her before, Karen Travis. She did the novelization of this movie. Okay, that's how I experienced it the first time. Is I ended up getting the book first because we
Oh,
were on
okay.
vacation. I had nothing to do, so my mom was like, "Here's a Star Wars book. Here you go."
Fine by
And
me.
and here's the thing. Travis actually kind of fixes a bunch of that in the book. Like she addresses Ahsoka's species, the Togruta, because here's the thing. Her species are natural predators. Those Leku and horns that they've got on their body, yeah,
Right.
those are actually used for hunting. They cause some sort of echolocation effect. There's even a
Oh.
bit where she and Rex are first talking to each other where, she can actually sense like a little rat moving around and like the predatory instincts and are just for a second flashing up in her because that's still genetically in there. And there's just some dialogue where it's not about her being this significant new character, and it's much more about, huh, okay, this is a person with defined traits. They have some unique things going on. This could actually be used for some interesting ways. Never comes up in the movie. They
Oh, okay.
that's another thing that you'll notice a lot with the Clone Wars is a lot of the more unique stuff gets ironed out. And again, I'm not entirely sure why. It's a kind of an odd choice to make, but for some reason that was a recurring thing with a lot of the stuff. And there's a lot of potential. That I think that's one of the things that probably bugs me most about the CGI series is there's a ton of potential in almost every scenario that they come up with, but they tend to not reach for that. They tend to be very happy with going for whatever is simplest, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So let's get into the plot a little, which is well, we can get through the whole plot very quickly because it's
Wait,
actually very simple. The uh, I guess Jabba the Hutt is an idiot. Is the plot of the movie?
oh, yeah.
Because the clone guy, the clone war, sorry, the robot separatists kidnap an adorable baby Hutt, who is not as adorable as I think they want him to be. Wow, I mean, seeing their treatment of this makes you really respect what a great job the Mandalorian did with Baby Yoda, because it's harder to pull off than you'd think.
Yeah, yeah. They
Oh,
really. I remember back in the day there was actually stinky merchandise. It did not
wow.
last.
No, I can imagine that people would not want their own Stinky the Hut doll. I don't know what they were thinking there, but yeah. What interested me is so they kidnap him, and like I guess they expect that, and he does, but I guess they just expect that he'll take their word for it. That oh no, the Jedi really did it. Well, yeah, but I mean, I think he knows who came and shot up his place and stole his son. Like they were mercenaries, but it's like since when have the Jedi and the New Republic? They've got a giant clone army. They've got the Jedi. Since when have they ever hired mercenaries to do anything? Whereas the unbelievably shady uh, Trade Federation just works with whoever they can pay for. Like that's their whole MO. So when mercenaries come up and steal his kid and then he's on a planet full of robots, you'd think maybe the robot army might be responsible for this one.
That's just crazy talk.
But like then their whole plan is to kidnap him to a planet, let the Jedi rescue the baby, get video footage of the Jedi rescuing the baby and killing robots to do it, and then and then immediately say, "Oh, well, the Jedi did it because they were trying to get the baby for some robots and having to kill people to do it." And they're assuming Jabba the Hutt will just, "Oh no, I'll just accept that." I mean, you're the guys who work with robots, so it makes perfect sense that the Jedi would be killing robots to get the baby. Like, what?
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. It's stuff like that. And the thing is, I know why they're having trying to have the separatists be, causing all these conspiracies because that was a big thing in the first before the new continuity rolling in was that oh yeah, there's a whole cloak of deception going on constantly. There's shadow games because it wasn't even like, Dooku just trying to win the war for the Separatists. He regularly would actually set up, like these really great potential war heroes for the Separatists to die so that the war would be as protracted as possible.
Oh
It
yeah, I
was,
mean both. I mean, and that is something you always have to keep in mind with this narrative, which is that both sides are being controlled by the same person.
yeah,
Like both sides of the war are being controlled by the same person, and the only purpose the war serves is to draw on as long as possible and being as costly as possible so that everyone will be fine. When he says, I'm the emperor and I can make this stop, everyone will want to go along with it.
yep,
And the plan doesn't work because the Jedi, after he does that and says, I'm the emperor, I can end it, the Jedi are like, yeah, we're just going to tell everybody that you were controlling both sides of the war and everyone will continue disliking you. And that's what leads to the next 20 years of open rebellion and skirmish battles.
mm.
So, his plan, it does work in that he becomes the emperor, but it doesn't work in the fact that pretty much everybody knows what he did. And, he doesn't get away with it for more than 20 years. So his 1,000-year Reich doesn't really come to much, I guess is the point I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But it's interesting, and that is something I will keep in mind as I'm watching it, because I guess it's this weird escape the story has, where, in a sense, every time the Trade Federation does something really idiotic that spoils their own plan, you can actually say, well, that doesn't really matter, because for the purposes, and it kind of makes the whole thing seem inconsequential, because for the purposes of the Palpatine's plans, it doesn't matter if he wins or not. Because both sides, it's impossible for him to quote unquote win or lose, because both sides are fighting for him.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
doesn't that, I mean, doesn't that let the air out of a lot of the conflict in a way?
yeah, and that is part of what when I mentioned the stuff like the Republic comics and things like that, why a lot of us cared about it back then, it typically came down to the fact that while the grand scope of the war you weren't concerned about, the personal narrative was the really big thing that you cared about because, well, this character might actually die. Because, like,
Right.
well, Quinlan Vos is playing James Bond as a really edgy Jedi. He might end up dead. There was actually a moment where they faked everyone out and made it look like he straight up died in the comics. And a lot of us were like, oh shit, did they actually kill him off? And
Interesting.
there was some real weight to that. Or with the Republic Commando series, where you didn't know if any of them were going to survive because most of them were clones, and the one who wasn't was a former Jedi. Like, all of
Okay.
them basically had death marked on their backs. Whereas in this TV show, everyone is going to appear in Revenge of the Sith except for the apprentice, so there's not nearly as much, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to them.
And I guess on some level, I can just, and this is what I'm going to have to go in thinking as I watch it, I can enjoy the mechanics of the various adventures he has, or the two of them have, well, 3 now, because I assume she's going to be in every episode too. That, and I just want to say, now seeing a bunch more of him, because there's a shockingly small amount of dialogue in the Clone Wars miniseries, which is, of course, by design. That's the whole point of it, is to be stylistic samurai stuff. But seeing this guy doing his, with a lot more dialogue, being Obi-Wan Kenobi, I remain blown away by how incredible his Ewan McGregor is.
Oh yeah, James Earl Taylor basically saved the first season of the Clone Wars. Like, it's not even a question. He saves so much of it because he is just ridiculously charming. Because
Well, what impresses me most, and you can tell me your thoughts on this, is like he's managing to do the hardest thing you can do as a voice actor, which is do an incredible impression of another performer, but at the same time, you're not just, oh, well, how would Ewan McGregor say this line? You're exactly recreating his voice while at the same time giving it life and emotion all its own.
oh yeah,
Like, it's a full performance. It's not just an impression. It is a perfect impression, but that's not all he's doing, and it blows me away.
Mhm. Oh
what an incredible job he's doing with this thing. And you're telling me that he continues being the MVP of this thing.
oh my gosh, so much of the time his Obi-Wan Kenobi is just like he does so much. Like even some of the stuff that really annoys me, like what happens with Mandalore and all of that, he is one of the people who just sells it. And that is something you notice with the series is that there's a handful of people that still come over from previous stuff, like the woman who also plays Padme, and a couple other characters that appear down the line, especially the guy who ends up voicing one of the best antagonists opposite Obi-Wan. They are all very seasoned Star Wars actors, and as a result, they are just natural with this at this point. Because by the point of time James Arnold Taylor was doing this voiceover for this movie, he'd done several games, he'd done at least a couple other things on the side. He'd been in the micro series. He just knows it. Because when you first hear him in the Revenge of the Sith game, it's a little bit more awkward. He's not fully comfortable in it yet, but by now, oh yeah, he has a ball with it. It's the point that I think you can pretty much, it's like for him, it's like pressing a button. He just instantaneously can become Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Well, and what's fascinating is because I was looking at how many seasons of this show there are, and it's like he has been James O'Taylor as Ewan McGregor has spent much more time playing Obi-Wan Kenobi than Ewan McGregor has.
Yep.
So it's kind of a weird situation.
Oh yeah, that's why they have Taylor as the guy who a lot of the actors from the Clone Wars ended up voicing for the Clone Wars era for Star Wars Battlefront 2 because they're just the voices associated with it. And that is one thing I will give the series credit is that it has essentially established an entire aesthetic for this era, which the first Clone Wars project, it was a bit more diverse. There were all sorts of different things. Like Republic Commando looks like a horror game, whereas the Tarkovsky series is looking like an art house thing. This series, if there is one thing that it absolutely nails, is it is very coherent and rather strict with a lot of the stuff that it nails. But in mentioning the voice actors, I do have a critique to give.
Go.
And it's going to surprise everyone because everyone's going to be like, oh, you're going to be critiquing Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka. No, she was a genuine fan of the series for the longest time, and she is working at it. And a lot like Katie Lotz in the DCCW verse, she gets better and better with time. The person who always drives me nuts is the guy they got for Anakin, Matt Lantner.
Right.
He actually hadn't seen the movies, or at least most of them, before.
How?
I don't know. I remember hearing that in the interview. I'm like, okay, that's concerning. And also, his voice doesn't really match up with what a lot of Anakin's portrayals have been. He doesn't really click with a lot of that, and he also mispronounces like almost every in-universe term he can.
Oh.
It's like it's Twi'lek, not Twi'lek. It's Twi'lek. We have dozens of examples showing how to pronounce this stuff, and a lot of that he just tends to not really get. It's not like he does a horrible job overall, just as someone playing Anakin Skywalker without concern about continuity with the rest of the portrayals, he does a fine job. But yeah, there's times where he gives me flashbacks to the male Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, where there's times when he's trying to sound imposing, and early on it doesn't really work. Later on, he does get the whole Dark Anakin bits a bit better, and he does the cocky stuff well, but out of the main trio, he's easily the weakest in my opinion. I'm kind of wondering why they went with him when they had other actors they'd worked with previously who could have done this, or they could have, I don't know. It's never really fit for me.
That is disappointing, but at the same time, I will say that I am interested to see how he grows into the part to the extent that he will. So hopefully he does, as you say. Maybe he'll get a little better. But the idea that this guy is already such a perfect Obi-Wan Kenobi just makes me happy watching it.
Oh, yeah.
And he's so good.
Oh,
his Obi-Wan Kenobi-ness is so perfect. Like he's just getting the little bit of bemusedness of Alec Guinness. You know?
Oh yes. Oh, he this is someone who definitely has studied top to bottom, and it also is especially great because, as you can tell, early on in the series, the animation is very stiff and very
Oh
deliberate.
yeah.
That also improves a lot with time, but goodness me, can you really tell the difference between the seasons? Because when you get to around season 6, everything is moving in an almost lifelike fluidity. Whereas here, people, they turn their head, both of their eyes move in unison, and it's like, wow, yeah, CGI animation has come a long way.
That I knew, but I mean, oh, and one other thing, uh, Zero the Hutt. Weird
Oh
vocal
my.
choice on that one.
I want to just point out also when Karen Travis did her novel adaptation,
Yeah.
as I've said before, she did actually some good queer representation with her Republic Commando books. So when she did the novelization, she's like, yeah, I'm just skipping all of those scenes. Like, it gets mentioned that Padme did something off screen to help and everything, but
But
in novelization,
oof.
like, we're just going to avoid this really uncomfortable stereotype.
Yeah, and it's like because it goes so far past gay stereotypes into just oof territory when you're watching it.
Unfortunately, he appears several times after this.
Oh God. Wow, that is just rough to hear. Oh,
Yeah.
poor Zero the Hutt. You are a how do I put this nicely? I mean, there's no way to nicely say an offensive stereotype character.
Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, it gets weirder because, and this is something that has now become a thing with the Disney continuity too, is that in response to people saying that he is very much a really bad gay stereotype, they later gave him a girlfriend.
No,
Yeah, like that was apparently their solution to this.
that is not the solution. That does not
Um,
fix anything.
Speaking of things that don't fix anything, you know the
Oh,
ship that Anakin picks up, the Twilight, the weird blue cruiser?
of course, yeah.
Yeah, fun fact, apparently the reason they give him this for a couple seasons of the show isn't because like they actually really thought that Anakin should have his own personal ship or anything. It's because they have Uncle Owen lie that Anakin was on a Corellian freighter, that he was a freighter pilot, and that's what he was doing back during the Clone Wars, that he wasn't a Jedi. So
Oh,
this was their way of trying to make it be like, no, really, he did have a Corellian freighter from a certain
it's
point of view.
from a certain point of view, he was telling the truth. No, you can just. It's okay if you tell a lie about your dad. It's fine. When your dad was a crazy murderer who killed all the Jedi, you can just lie to the son about who his dad was. That's fine.
And there is just one last thing I wanted to say as
Okay.
out of all of my major criticisms of the movie and
Yeah.
just this starting point for the series, I hate what they did to Ventress's design. She
Yeah, it
looks
was a big
hideous.
change. And I was going to ask you, are they saying that she was messed up in the fall or something? Because she looks
No, this is just the
completely
design they
different.
chose for her. Like the thing is, it's not even like they couldn't do the old design because there is one episode where they give her her old outfit. It comes out of nowhere. It's not clear why, and it is the
And it looks great.
only time. I don't get it. It's one of those weird things where they just redesigned it because they could, not because they should.
Oh, that's so disappointing. Oh well, que sera, sera.
Yeah.
Uh, so as you can imagine, we are going to continue watching. We are going to continue watching Clone Wars. So you can join us back here next time when we've watched Clone Wars season 1, and we can tell you the highs and lows about that season, and I can see how, at least from my point of view, the characters are developing, and seeing if it's how long it's going to take before it reaches the heights that it eventually gets to. He
Yeah,
said, his voice going
it
up, hopefully.
just it takes them a long time. It always takes them a long time for some
Oh,
reason.
okay. That's. I'm not particularly surprised, but I am glad it's going to get there. But for now, would you like to encourage people to go check things out?
Oh yes, you can check me out on The Escapist at Second Look, where I take a look at all sorts of games that, well, deserve a second look. My most recent one, as of this recording, is about Splatterhouse 2010, which our lovely host here, Hidden Object Review, actually hooked me up with a copy of. I'm very grateful to have experienced it, and absolutely it is a game that you need to experience because It is somehow one of the crassest, most absurdly grindhouse games ever with so much heart. And besides that, be sure to check me out on Unbridged Gamer on YouTube, where I talk about all sorts of other games. And there's some really exciting stuff coming up. I'm going to be doing a bunch of motion controlled games. And we're finally taking a look at the PS4 exclusives.
Yay. Oh, that's going to be great. Especially since you're going to be playing a little something called
Days Gone.
Days Gone. And that's why I've been thematically playing it during the stream, during this recording. So people got excited to hear you talking about it. I mean, I only finally loaded up my copy of this game because you told me to, and whoo boy, is it incredible.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's magnificent.
And fun fact, the lead actor appears in the Clone Wars.
Oh, really? So Sam Witwer, in addition to being the star of the Force Unleashed games, is going to be in Clone Wars at some point.
He's been in Clone Wars. He's been in a couple other things, and he's pretty much stayed in Star Wars despite the Force Unleashed being retconned out. So yeah, you're gonna hear his voice popping up in a lot of ways you never expect it.
I gotta say, I love how much this actor loves Star Wars.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so lovingly adorable and just so genuine.
That is great to hear. All right, so we will see you back here for more Clone Wars next time, but until then, I'm going to say au revoir.